Morning. Hey, Swag Vegan. First of all, can you hear me? Good morning. All right, look at you showing up, being the first in line with an apple for the teacher. Did you bring me where my apple? Where my apple? It's breakfast. It's breakfast time. Y'all gotta. Anyway, um, it's interesting. Last week when I was showing up, I don't know. I've been watching a little bit of Yvette Carnell. I don't know if people are familiar with Yvette. It's a bit quiet. Uh-oh. Meaning I'm a bit quiet. I wonder if I'm a bit quiet because I'm just. Good morning, Ananda. I wonder if I'm a bit quiet just because I'm being quiet. Um, but you can hear me, yes? Should I be? Look at me. It's so rude of me to do my toilette in front of all of you in this way. Anyway, but so you were saying, so it's a bit quiet. I wonder what that is. I don't know if there's anything that I can do to improve that. Good morning. Good morning. I was just talking about Yvette Carnell. I don't know if anybody watches Yvette Carnell, but I guess uh, their their broadcasts are. Oh, you can hear now. That's good. All right. So maybe it was on your end. And how about you, Ananda? Can you hear pretty clearly? I hope so because I've turned off the heater, which tends to blow and make noise, making it difficult, making me have to shout, and so it's quite. Good morning, Robin. Welcome to the broadcast. I keep starting this thing about Yvette Carnell because Yvette Carnell says I want everybody to get themselves settled down, pour your libation. I just love it. Something about that is so humane. It's like we're all good morning, good morning. It's like we're all here together. It's early in the morning, so I hope everybody has done their little sun salutation, the little downward dog. It's interesting that Jack. The first thing Jack does when he like gets up is he does a little sun salutation, a little downward dog, and it always makes me think, I wonder if that is the fact that, a dog does that instinctively is a clue that maybe, getting up and doing a little stretch is just, part of how we are wired. I don't know. I don't know. So I hope everyone's well this morning. It's been an interesting week. It's been so fun. I don't know if folks are aware that I have a YouTube channel. It's Reg Flowers. It's just my name, Reg Flowers, and you check it out at YouTube. It's so funny because I started the channel when, like, I had no intention for anyone to ever be watching the channel, so it was really just an extension of my, my Gmail account or what have you. And so now it's like, here's this channel, and these people watch, and then I, only have a handful, like 2.5K subscribers, whatever. It's a little bit of something, something. Um, I'm not ashamed, but it's a little bit of something, something. But all these people, they know my name. They can look me up. They can do whatever they want. But it really saves people the time of doxing me, right? Because I'm so public. I'm so public. I just put it all out there. So if anybody wants to know, just watch the videos, and I'll walk you right up to the door, front door of my house. Several times I've walked people up to the front door of my house, which is probably dangerous. I don't know. Hmm. So good. All right, good. Ananda says can hear nice and clear. So y'all, and it's interesting because I realized last week that I really just a little coffee with a little about this much crack in it. No, it's just a little coffee. It's a little coffee. In fact, it's leftover coffee from yesterday with a little almond milk and a little agave nectar. So like a little sweet little treat. I've already had. I started the day with this. This was a collard green, pineapple, and banana smoothie. Yes, and this was full. You can see the little line there. This was full. So I downed this morning, and I'm having a little coffee. And my goal is also I'm trying to up my water intake. So this is a half a gallon of water. So I'm gonna try to drink this and then, fill it again. Try to, finish this by, about halfway through the day and then fill it again and then sip the rest of it. So I'm trying to drink a gallon of water a day. You know, I don't know. Is it working, y'all? Is my skin clear? I started getting some blemishes. I don't know if people noticed, but if you go back and watch my videos from about a week ago, a week and a half ago, you can see I had some blemishes and I was like, what is this about? Let me drink some more water. So I did that. All right, so it's a few minutes. I love it when people, I love when y'all giggle. I love it when I make y'all laugh in the morning. It makes me feel like I've accomplished something. All right, Vegan Call Quest, welcome. I don't know if y'all know my dear buddy Vegan Call Quest also has a YouTube channel and also is a a consistent YouNow broadcaster. Will probably be broadcasting moments after this broadcast ends, but you could catch probably every day. I wish. Do you have a regular schedule, Vegan Call Quest? And thank you for inviting 100,077 fans to the broadcast. That number gets bigger every time you show up in here, and well deserved. And well deserved. You have such a sparkling personality. I love spending time with you on the internet. So, a couple of things, y'all. It's not a real rush or anything, but I'm excited because, I'm engaged in all these projects, y'all. I'm engaged in all these projects, y'all. And I was describing to someone the projects that I'm engaged in. Thank you for the likes, Swag Vegan. I was explaining to some people. So thank you for the likes, Swag Vegan. I'm like trained. Thank you for the likes. Anyway, now you're teasing me. Thank you for the likes, Swag Vegan. So, and who's now? I'm like, who's training who? You're wonderful. So I was explaining to someone some of the work that I do, like trying to explain the work I do. And I was just like, wow, how did I end up doing that work? How of all of the things that I do, thank you so much for the likes, Vegan Call Quest. How did I fall into doing the work that I do? Because no like little kid says, when I grow up, I want to be a meeting facilitator. I want to, I want to work on communities on developing processes and policies by which they can live in a more democratic fashion. What 7-year-old does that? But the fact of the matter is, when I was 7, that's actually what I used to do. And I've been thinking about it because I've been applying for this grant. And so I've had to do all this kind of like talking about myself, which is its own weird thing. But here I am talking about myself, right? So anyway, it was just interesting for me to trace back. And it was so obvious when I was a kid that I was going to grow up and be an organizer because I used to be like, hey y'all, let's do a show on the lawn of the house. Yeah, okay, so and so, you're gonna go tell everybody, go make some flyers and bring them back, and you're gonna sing and you're gonna do a little dance and you're gonna do the thing right based on what people would, what I figured people would be interested in doing. And we would do talent shows and all this stuff, like right on my front lawn, right on the front lawn of the house. What we call the front lawn, which was really, like a 5 by 10 little patch of grass, right? Like, I don't know if you know Philadelphia well, but I lived in Philadelphia, grew up in Philadelphia, in little row houses in Philadelphia, and they usually have a little patch of grass on the lawn because the houses are built up a little so that the first floor is not level with the ground for flooding, whatever. They're just good design practices. Anyway, I feel like I have talked enough, and I feel like we are now ready to jump in to back into Pedagogy of the Oppressed. Last week we talked about chapter 1. Any last thoughts on chapter 1? For those of us, for those of you just joining us, what we've been doing is we've been reading through. I'm calling this the Pedagogy of the Oppressed study group, and it's going to be in these 4 sessions. Well, actually, there were 5. There was an introductory section last week. We did chapter 1. This week we're looking at chapter 2, and then we'll look at chapters 3 and 4 in the upcoming weeks. And the format is we do a little review of what we've done in the past, and then each week at the end of the talk, I offer some reflections for the next week. And so there are some reflections that are on the table that I'm hoping we're going to hear from some folks who, just had an opportunity to read through. And, I'm really trying to get people to really trying to get people to guest as opposed to just talking in the chat box. And then that way we can actually hear from some other voices. And this is a much more shared experience. And I hope that by reading chapter 2, y'all have figured out why it is so important for this knowledge to be something that's coming from everybody as much as possible. Another thing is I realized last week is that, it's if I'm sitting here talking, the people who are listening in on YouTube, which is where probably most people are going to hear this, because there's a handful of us here this morning, but I want to also create some space. So there may be, I don't know, maybe next week I'll even prepare some musical interlude music, some interlude music for people to play while people have a chance to type, like literally type in the comment box some of their thoughts on some of the things that were said. And so what I might do today is I might just like take a sip and say, type this number in the comment box if you have had this experience, or type a word that you've heard, or what are some of the definitions or words that you've heard. I don't want to give away the lesson today, but as we get there, you'll figure it out. So when you hear me asking these questions and then pausing and drinking, you'll understand it's for the folks at home, even though we're all at home, I imagine. Welcome, Sean DeBess. And yes, I'm glad that you're amused this morning. What a wonderful way to come in uh, to the session. Anyway, all that said, so last week I had like 4 pages of notes for you. Today I don't have that much. We're going to probably get through the material very quickly, and then just have room to just chat about whatever's going on with you. Maybe if you want to chat about some of the content from some of the videos or anything that's going on in the world, we can do that. And hopefully we'll be able to do all of that in about an hour. So last week we talked about chapter 1, and again I asked the question, did anybody have any last thoughts? Um, Vegan Call Quest says, I try to come on, this is an answer to the question, when are you on? I try to come on after work on weekdays and early weekends. Thank you, good to see you. Oh, okay, I see. So that's when, that makes sense, because you do seem to come in on the evening, but you're on the West Coast, so there's a 3-hour time difference, so it makes sense about the time that I see you pop up. Because it's later in the day for me. So we talked about chapter 1, which really boiled down to this, description of, what Freire considers as the vocation of humanity, and that is to become more human, and that there's this distortion that exists where some are being dehumanized some are being dehumanized to provide a benefit to others, right? And that this process is ultimately dehumanizing to all parties, right? And so he also suggests that it is the work of the oppressed to correct this distortion through revolutionary action, through praxis, what he calls praxis, which is a system, it's a cycle of action and reflection, where we're looking at the world that we live in a critical way, and seeking the ways in which we might transform that world, right? So it's really about engagement with the world as it is. And even like with revolutionary leadership, he paints this idea that we don't want a revolutionary leadership who simply acts in the same mode of the oppressor. That the leadership must act with the oppressed to develop this pedagogy of the oppressed. This pedagogy of the oppressed, which is the name of it, the title of the book. So that all happens in chapter 1. And in chapter 2, Paulo Freire talks to us about one of the ways in which this submersion in the reality of oppression takes place. And he says, he offers that it happens through the education system, and he outlines 2 conflicting teaching methodologies, and talks about the principles and the practices of each, and the ways in which either is a liberatory practice or an oppressive practice. And I offered for reflection several questions. One was, what are the several teaching methodologies discussed in chapter 2? And so if you're at home, you can go ahead and start typing in the box. Type your best guess. What are the several veganista? Hello. We need to talk about this early Sunday mornings. Welcome. I'm glad you're here. Oh no. Swag Vegan, you missed a little bit, but that's okay. We're just really getting started on chapter 2. I simply outlined chapter 2. Freire outlines two conflicting teaching methodologies, the principles and practices of each, and the ways in which each is either a liberatory practice or an oppressive practice. And then I just offered the first of the reflection, which was what are the several teaching methodologies discussed in chapter 2? And so if you're watching on YouTube, you have an opportunity to go ahead and just type in, because I'd love to hear from you what you thought. All right, here's Swag Vegan, hand raised and ready to talk about banking and problem posing. Right, so those are the two, right? But I don't know if anybody wants to get on, but I would love to hear someone discuss them. Is there anybody who would like to come on and guest and discuss their take on these two conflicting methodologies? Right, banking and problem posing. It's going to be cute when I look at this on YouTube and see if there's actually a few people who've typed in an answer, right? So the banking methodology and the problem posing methodology, right? And then, of course, the next question was like, nowadays, right? This was written in the 70s, right? In the 70s. I mentioned last week this was written while Freire was at Harvard. Was the English translation was written while Freire was at Harvard. He was in exile um, from Brazil, and so I wondered which are the dominant practices that folks recognize in the education system that they grew up in, and this was really an opportunity for someone to feed back and just give us a little testimony. So I'm hoping for some testimony. Obviously, if you're watching on YouTube, this is an opportunity for you to write something in the comments section. Just write a little bit about your experience. Ooh, cool. Swag Vegan says, I'm cooking but could pop on for a while. I'm actually a failed teacher. We're going to talk about what that means. But yes, please, I would love to hear from you, Swag Vegan. So come on, jump on in the guest queue. Or actually, I'm not going to have you. I'm not going to mess around. I ain't waiting for this. Here's Swag Vegan to talk a little bit about the the practices that they recognize, and maybe even to like talk a little bit more about their answers to the question. Hey, Swag Vegan, how are you? Let me hear you.
Hi, can you hear me?
Yes, I can hear you. Wonderful. And you sound great. I'm going to turn my sound. I hope it's not. So Veganista says, repeat the question if you are talking to, as if you're talking to a third grader. Okay, so like when you went to school, right? So first of all, we're going to hear from Swag Vegan. We're going to hear a little bit more about these two different methodologies, banking and problem posing, right? So and of course, as we go along with the reading, like I'm trying to like line my way of talking about it a little bit to the way Freire talks about it, so that people can follow along. But really, it's like there are two different ways that you have two. Freire offers us two different ways that people can teach, right? And this is sort of, I'm also setting you up, Swag Vegan, to jump right in and respond. So this is the easy, the clear, hopefully the clear definition. So there are two ways that Freire talks about that. There are two options, right? Obviously, there are all kinds of ways that people can teach, but and you offered the answer. So do you want to talk about a little bit about those two ways and how you understand them?
Okay, I'll say a few things. Don't know if it'll rest. Sorry. Uh, can you give me a minute, Reg? I'm going to put my headphones on so that I
Yeah, I'm
don't.
gonna put
Hey everyone, is that better?
All right. Okay. Hello. Can you
Hey,
hear me?
uh,
Wonderful. Wonderful. Okay. So first of all, look at this. So first of all, you're getting some hashtags. You're getting hashtagged right now by Vegan Cult Quest.
oh yeah,
And welcome anyone else who's joined us. Okay, so we have our first guest in the study group. I'm excited about. First of all, can you introduce go ahead and introduce yourself to the people, and then jump into the question. Like just give yourself a little warm up if you want, if you like.
okay. Good morning everyone, or good afternoon if you're over here in the UK. I'm Swag Vegan. I come on here on YouNow occasionally to watch people like Reg and Vegan Cold Quest. But mostly I'm on YouTube. I have a very small channel, but it's a lot of fun. I just talk about veganism really. But I've been a follower of Reg for about a year. I'm sure you all know he's the bomb.
Oh, thanks. That's sweet. All right.
But
So these thank you so much, and it's wonderful to see your face and hear your voice. It's great. So you talked about the two choices that Freire gives us
Mhm.
for teaching.
Oh
So you
yeah,
want
so
to?
yeah, okay. So the banking system of education is where seemingly there's a set amount of certain knowledge or information which the people in authority feel needs to be imparted upon the students. So the teacher's job is just to put the information into the student's head, and then it's the student's job to regurgitate the information to clarify that the teacher has understood that they've assimilated the information. Does that sound about accurate?
Yeah, it sounds about right. And of course, like if you're those of you who are watching on YouTube, obviously you may feel like there are, things to fill in. So feel free to, type in your thoughts as well. And so you've offered us this idea of and I really like to like visualize it. Can you imagine like if our heads had a little twist where you could open it up and imagine, in the mind of the teacher, right? That this is that head, in order to fill it up, that head has to be empty, right? To sort
Mhm.
of like really visualize in this way that the what is that, the attitude that the teacher might have to feel as though their role is to fill the heads of the student, right? So that's the banking method. And so then the other, what's the other as far as you were able to draw from the text?
So the other method being the problem posing method of teaching would be where and this might link in with some of the NVC stuff which we've talked about, as you know,
Hmm.
Reg, uh, where we all have certain needs to be met. We've got issues, we've got challenges to overcome in order to meet our needs. Uh,
Hmm.
and if we can bring up discussions rather than just straight tutorials, we can have discussions between teacher and students. We can discuss ideas creatively in a way that we can actually uh, cooperatively, collaboratively address those issues together, where everyone gets to contribute to the decision making process.
Cool. Yeah. So, um,
Hiya. Sorry, my kids have just got in, Reg. So,
hello. You're, it's quite all right. It's quite all right. Do you need to jump off, are you, or do you want to, do you have some room to talk a little bit more?
no, I can hang around for another 5, 10 minutes, maybe.
Oh, great.
If
Because
yeah,
I was hoping that you could, because so we heard that from someone else, right? So I just didn't want to be the one who was talking, describing those two things. But I wanted you to talk a little bit about your experience in education and which of these modalities did you feel were present in the teaching that you experienced, either when you were at school or in the way that the classroom was run, or where the way that you were encouraged to run your classroom when you were teaching?
okay. So as a student, I guess. Oh, sorry, I just got to plug my phone back in so it doesn't die again.
Hmm.
So obviously, as a student, I guess my bulk of my experience would be more akin to the banking method of teaching. There's a syllabus, and their job is to get you to learn what's on the syllabus, so that you can go and sit an exam or write an essay, and they'll either give you a pass or a fail is
Mm-hmm.
how it boils down to it. Uh, so it's not to say that the teachers don't care about you at a qualitative level, but their job is to get you in a position to pass your exams so that you can go on and be successful at something that might not have anything to do with what you've studied.
Mm-hmm.
Not meaning to be too cynical.
Mm-hmm.
It's like a passport.
Wow. So in order to move on, you have to get your passport, your learning, your education passport stamped.
Exactly.
Okay.
Reg, could I just pop away for 1 minute? I've just got
Yep.
to say a quick word to somebody.
Okay, cool.
Uh, yeah, just give us a sec. Thank you very much.
Yes. So we just heard from Swag Vegan just a little bit about uh, their experience in education, and just again reiterating this idea that it was the banking method. And I wonder if most of you have a similar experience where you felt that you were given things to memorize, and then you came back and you had to regurgitate that information that you learned. And I love this analogy of the passport. And I also love that you brought up the idea that this isn't the teacher's not the villain here. It's not that the teacher doesn't like the students or doesn't have the best intentions. But we've talked about it,
Lentil soup.
a lot has been talked about intentions, right? Oh, it's a different time of day for you. I realize that it may not be it may not be first thing in the morning for you. Um, but this idea that the teacher isn't necessarily an adversary of the student, but this is the way that the teacher, these are the marching orders that the teacher has been given. And so,
Exactly.
with that in mind, and it ties back to who ultimately is responsible for the creation of this program that the teacher is sharing with us. And I'm going to get a little bit into the beliefs and practices and just read off Freire's list in a little bit. Actually, you know what? I'll share that now if you don't mind. It's just 10 items to describe what Freire means by the uh, by the banking method, and what are some of the attitudes and practices. So, in according to Freire, in the banking method, the teacher teaches and the students are taught. Quite obvious, right? The teacher knows everything, the students know nothing. The teacher thinks and the students are thought about. The teacher talks and the students listen meekly. The teacher disciplines and the students are disciplined. The teacher chooses and enforces his choice and the students comply. The teacher acts and the students have the illusion of acting through the action of the teacher. The teacher chooses the program content and the students who were not consulted adapt to it. The teacher confuses the authority of knowledge with his or her own professional authority, which she and he sets in opposition to the freedom of the students. And then the last is the teacher is the subject of the learning process, while the pupils are mere objects. Does that feel, does that land, Swag Vegan? Does it land for you as what you were describing? Does it feel about right? Are there any of those that are surprising to you or make you kind of go, well, it wasn't that bad? I don't know what are your thoughts there on those 10 attitudes and practices of the oppressive the banking method?
Well, I guess that particular kind of set of points there is quite an extreme form of the situation that at hand. But then at the same time, you could also consider that compared to the schooling that a lot of people maybe in previous generations where you'd have corporal punishment and things like that, there are situations where it's even worse.
Hmm.
I mean, I was never caned at school, thank God.
Hmm.
Although I had a headmaster when I was at primary school. Not good, eh?
No, not at all.
Oh dear. So
Come on, come on, come on. Yeah, I didn't mean to take you off your game, but the nuns were harsh when I went to school. The
I
nuns
can
were
imagine.
harsh. They were harsh. But come on. So come on. Tell us a little bit more. Because you were continuing. Because and I think you were going to talk a little bit about your experience as a teacher as well. But go ahead. Where you complete your thought.
So yeah, I can see that as I say, what Freire is saying there is the extreme kind of cynical worst case scenario of what's actually going on, where it's just a trickle down of authority and
Hmm.
power and people telling other people what to do.
Hmm.
Uh, and at the other side, you know, I had teachers that were really cool and really wanted you to actually do well in life, you know, to succeed at a qualitative level, not just at a quantitative level.
Hmm.
If yeah.
Hmm.
And as for my experience as a teaching student, if you like, sorry, I'm just trying to keep the light from the back of my head there. So
Hmm.
my experiences as a teaching student is within the university. There's this kind of idealized idea of how education should be, possibly more akin to the problem posing method of teaching. But
Hmm.
then when you go out into the professional field, or you know, even as a trainee, and you know you're in the classroom teaching a bunch of kids a lesson that you've had to prepare yourself, that
Hmm.
you hope they're going to show some interest in and maybe actually engage with. And to be fair, they do. You know, you only have to have a few simple, interesting ideas, and they will. Kids want to learn, and I think education theorists know this. Uh, but at a certain level, schools are in the business of creating, at that quantitative level, successful children who have that passport to go out to university or to such and such a direction. Uh, Whereas, you know, I can remember studying sociology at school and education within sociology, and the idea that this is all they do. They just train them to get this passport, whereas actually most learning is done on the job.
I'm in agreement with you. I feel that the teachers that I've met, the teachers that I know in the classrooms that I've been in, there really is an attempt to have more of a dialogue happening in the classroom, presenting information that reflects the experiences of the students, that are connected to the experiences of the students, and if not problem posing, that the students are being presented with challenges that send them out into the world to do some type of investigation and then to bring that back into the classroom. So I do sense that. And it seems to me that the administrative response to that is to give the teachers specific goals that must be met in the classroom.
Hmm.
And in New York City, I think they call them the region exams, and there are all of these standardized tests where the students must know the information that is on that test. So if the teacher is not creating the program that meets that will prepare the students for that standardized test, where it's all of those things, right? It's been handed down from some power up above and says the students have to know all of this, right?
Hmm.
And as I'm also doing a little study of economics, y'all, right? So I'm doing some work on the economic front. I do some work in the solidarity economy, and I felt like I didn't know enough like basic fundamentals of economics. So I'm doing some and I'll include some links to it. I'll be talking about it a little bit more on the channel. But it's basic economics, right? There's a scarcity of time. There's a scarcity of thought energy that the teacher has, that the students have.
Hmm.
And so to inundate the teacher with these standardized tests, where if they don't meet the standardized test, their school's going to lose money, right? It's
Hmm.
not that the teacher's going to be fired, it's that the school is going to lose funding, right? So there's all of these, or your school might get closed if your test scores are too low, right? And this is all part of another thing. We can get into the whole idea of privatization of schools. I don't know if that's happening where you are. In fact, let me ask you, is that something that you find is happening where you are as well? Do you have these standardized tests that the teachers must teach to? And are there ramifications, consequences if the students are not performing well on these tests?
Yeah, absolutely. No, I mean, that's the name of the game, is getting the students past through their tests. Obviously, there's regions which have different syllabuses, but that's the thing. It is about getting those almost like a tick box kind of. Do they know what a triangle is? Do they know
Hmm.
what an acute angle is? And that was my subject, mathematics.
Hmm.
But I didn't make it all the way through my course because the red tape involved, not just in terms of the academic course, but the actual time in school, checking that such and such hasn't done their homework, and you've got to keep them back for detention until they finished it.
Hmm.
And
Hmm.
just that it's a very very box like, mundane way of organizing things, rather than actually saying, well, is there anything going on? That you didn't do your homework? What's going on for you? Is there anything about this subject that you don't find interesting? Is there anything about my teaching that you don't find interesting? Again, engaging in that sort of collaborative, communicative
Hmm.
style of conversation.
Yeah, so like yeah, and it's really more and again more and more in the classroom as society has responded, and probably because people go through this system and they're like, I do not want to recreate that for anybody. So in the classroom, like on the front lines, it seems that teachers really are trying to make a shift here. And there are those who will tell you that's for the worst. It's like, why are these liberal teachers in here trying to teach people about liberate,
Yeah,
trying to teach? Why are you trying to teach about freedom? You
yeah,
ain't supposed to
yeah.
be you're supposed to be teaching about no freedom. You're supposed to be teaching what I told you to teach, right? And of course, it's because and I offer this, and not I, but Freire offers this idea that the oppressor has a worldview,
Hmm.
and they love that worldview, and they want to see that realized as much as possible, right? Which makes sense. It's like when you decorate your house. But when you have all the money and all the resources, you don't just get to decorate your house, you get to decorate the street when you walk down the street, what you see as you drive, right? All of these things are within the control of this ruling class. And the way you want people to behave, what you want people to be talking about, what you want them to be interested in, and how you want to prepare them to come and work for you and come and be and work under you, right? And know how to behave for you, right? So like there's also an element of behavior modification in the education system, right? Or at least the ideology that's being transferred through the education process, right? So yeah. So, but what an interesting struggle, right? What an interesting way to find ourselves having evolved from the time that Freire was writing this book, where it was just, he's able to say just, and he's of course writing in Brazil, and during a time where the government is becoming there's going to be a military coup. There's a military coup that occurs just before this book is being written, right? So, maybe some of the cynicism of the harshness that we hear in the way Freire describes that relationship between the teacher and student, or what he calls the contradiction between the student teacher contradiction, is based on a very concrete reality that he's coming out of, right?
Hmm.
But also seeing modeled in the United States, because he's in the United States when he's translating Pedagogy of the Oppressed into English. So now I know I only have you for a limited amount of time here, but yeah. So we talked about this. We did the attitudes and the practices. So is there anything else that you want to say about is there anything that you want to say about the alternative, right? Problem posing. So the ways that you have seen this problem posing version of education, are there places where you see this, or you talked a little bit about what was happening when you were at university, when you were learning. For example, did you read Pedagogy of the Oppressed?
I didn't know. I mean, I only heard about Paulo Freire through learning about Marshall Rosenberg, uh,
Okay.
who and Rosenberg had said that Freire was a big influence on him.
Okay.
So I hadn't read the book before. I downloaded the PDF in preparation for these talks, you know.
Okay,
Uh,
great.
but my wife is actually from Brazil, and you know she's my age. I'm 41. She's
Okay,
42.
okay.
Uh, so she's a bit too young to really have experienced that real kind of heavy military presence herself. Uh,
Right. Was born like right as it
she said
was.
it's coming to an end.
Right. Yeah, because it was by the 80s it was being chipped. They were chipping away at it, and they were, and some of it was, I'm guessing that it's not that they were necessarily shifting in the way that they were thinking about the people, but understanding that the people are only going to put up with this for so long before they revolt, right? But okay, so go ahead, continue. Sorry to interrupt.
No, it's that's fine. Uh, and yeah, according to her, well, as you've just alluded to, things are pretty harsh. Were pretty harsh out there. So that's why you've got that real kind of revolutionary style of writing, I would imagine, from
Hmm.
Freire.
Hmm.
And I just wanted to say one more thing back in relation to how the teaching system works. It is. When I went to the school that I taught in, there was a big sign outside saying something like 87% pass rate, A star to C. In other words, advertising just how many students get these top grades
Hmm.
that they need to go on to study further education, and that's the name of the game. Is it's it's all league tables and things like that,
Hmm.
and it doesn't necessarily mean that the kids are happier. Yeah, I don't know. I don't know if they are.
Right.
Uh,
And it's interesting because I've been talking about was talking about like technology, right? And so it's like these oppressive systems know how to adjust, right? So if we're finding that students, for example, are dropping out of schools, which is what's happening in Detroit, students are just walking, they're leaving, they're not having it, right? And
well,
so
out of
come on.
secondary school. Sorry, out of secondary school or out of universities?
This
Or
is
both?
secondary schools. This is high
Right.
school. This is people like
Yeah.
not graduating from high school.
Uh-huh.
Um, and so there are the two responses. One is to just close the school,
Mm.
and so there. And then the other is to privatize the system
Yeah.
so that you get a slightly different. So basically, what we're looking for in those privatized schools is we get to handpick the students who get it, right? Who get it,
Yeah. Yeah.
and
So
so you have.
it reinforces that elitist nature of the
Hmm.
education system. Then.
Hmm. Hmm.
Yeah.
Right, and to be able to be a good student is to be a good person, right? And that's the idea too, is to be a good student is to be a good person. Okay, so this is great. That actually kind of carries us through. That's kind of carries us through. I have some other thoughts that I was going to offer, but do you have any last words? I'm going to let you go, and then I'm going to offer some other thoughts and see if there's anybody else who wants to jump on. I don't think we're at about quarter to 12, and so I want to just offer some final thoughts that I jotted down, but I also want to get us into prep for chapter 3. And chapter 3, y'all.
Yeah, yeah. As Dave Merritt's just said, I do need to get off and finish the tea. So I'm going to thank you so much, Reg, for having me on, and hopefully we could chat again another time. It's been a real pleasure. Thank you.
Actually, thank you so much. Swag vegan,
Take
yo.
care, man. Bye
Oh,
now.
swag. What is a swag? So David
Okay.
Merritt keeps asking, what is a swag?
Yeah, yeah, yeah. Okay. When I was coming up with my YouTube channel, I was saying like, oh, what's my name going to be? Originally, I was called Fat Vegan because I was appalled at the fat shaming within the vegan community. So I wanted to have a sort of satirical name. So I used to say, I'm not fat, but I am vegan. Then I realized maybe that's not so culturally sensitive. So I thought, what else could I be? Well, I'm just, an old guy with grey hair that became vegan, that still likes to play guitar, thinks he's a bit cool, but is not really that cool. But then my kids came home from school and they said, they started saying swag. And I said, what does that mean? And they said, oh, it means cool. So I thought, oh, yeah, I'll be swag vegan. I'm not swag, I'm vegan. Thank you very much, everybody. Good luck.
You're
And
welcome.
thanks
Bye
again,
now.
Reg. Bye.
Bye now. I'm gonna sing you out. No one in the corner got swagger like us. Y'all know it. Come on, y'all. Y'all know swagger. Swagger. So thank you so much, Swag Vegan, for joining us. And Swag Vegan it also has a YouTube channel. Go check it out. So thank you for offering us some testimony in terms of this. Some final thoughts on chapter two. And it connects to, so we talked about the different methodologies, right? We talked about this idea that the oppressor creates the world, right? Holds a certain dominant worldview, and we spend, according to Freire, our young lives 7 hours a day, 5 days a week, for 12 years, and if people who go into college, even more, being indoctrinated into the worldview of the oppressor, right? According to Freire. Swag Vegan, thank you so much again for the thank you for the likes. Yes, we're still talking. This is for the next Dave, for the next several weeks. We're doing like a little study group on pedagogy of the oppressed. So it's just what's happening. It's just what's happening now. We're probably going to move on to economics, just so you know. Yeah, Dave, welcome. I'm glad that you're here. I'm glad that you're here. And so we've been reading through just one chapter at a time. The chapters aren't so long. And I've been including links to a PDF of Pedagogy of the Oppressed in English. Apologies. I happen to have it in Spanish, but I don't know. I didn't find links for it in other languages, but I imagine that it's been translated into several other languages, certainly into Spanish. It's certainly available in Portuguese. And so we've been reading through Pedagogy of the Oppressed just to kind of get a sense of ways that we might conscientiously approach the way we work. I'm an organizer. Even those of us who are so vegans, there are people who may be interested in bringing to individuals a different way of thinking about the world, other than the dominant version that's been created for us. And so we're using Pedagogy of the Oppressed to kind of discuss that. Um, and so, I went through, I love it as an inspiration for better ways of living and teaching. Yes, exactly. 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 And Swag Vegan actually made some associations between this and I believe it's Rosenberg, who developed the concept of nonviolent communication. And those of you watching on the YouTube channel, if you search through this channel, I've done a video, a very simple breakdown of what nonviolent communication is. It's something that's just very specific. Obviously, what nonviolence means to each of us is very personal, but there is a something called nonviolent communication that was developed in the same way that the pedagogy of the oppressed was developed by Paulo Freire. And so some connections that I made, and I don't know if any of you are have been watching. Again, I've been making these 3-minute videos, 1 3-minute video a day, doing that for the month of January. And in one of my videos, I talked about this idea of people who have religious beliefs and how holding religious beliefs opens one up to believe in things that cannot be proved. And my question is like, does that become problematic? Does that mean that there are things that cannot be proved that might be harmful to one group or other that are then being internalized as a kind of mythology? And then I talked a little bit more in a recent video about the idea of this mythology and how the people who believe in this mythology are not our enemies. These are people who we might attempt to engage and in some critical dialogue to encourage some questioning around these mythologies, and to maybe, instead of having somebody's, for example, if they say something that's racist or hold some racist belief, or I understand them to hold some racist belief, not to challenge the racism, but to instead have a conversation about their concrete reality. What is happening with you? Because there's us having a conversation about racism is pointless, right? Us having a conversation about homophobia, about sexism, those things they're pointless, right? Because I cannot prove, right, racism. I cannot even prove my worth as a human being. If you look at the color of my skin and want to question my value as a human being, there's nothing to be said about that. But I do understand that racism is a mechanism, right? It's a tool. Racism is a technology that was used to create certain divisions in society, right? So for us to basically engage on the dividing line is not necessarily helpful. What we can talk about are the concrete realities. What is happening in your life? Are you getting enough food? Do you have enough shelter? right? And so that's the idea. That's the problem posing, to get people to engage in what's happening in their lives and the challenges that they face in their lives, and have conversations about that as the learning material. And Paulo Freire calls it the he calls it the object of cognition. I'm actually looking for it in my notes, but I don't know why I'm trying to check my notes. I've been engaged in this book for so long, right? He calls it and he calls these things acts of cognition around one's reality, right? I look around and it's like, you know what? It's cold in my house. Wow, my heating bill is really, really high. I'm nervous that I'm not going to be able to pay it. And my heat's going to get turned off in the winter and I'm going to freeze, right? These are real, these are the concrete realities in which people are living, that are creating the anxieties that people need to, they need a cause. They need a cause. And if people haven't engaged around like what those, the root causes of what's happening in their lives through real analysis and real investigation, and connecting the dots, then it's so easy to internalize mythologies and say, well, it's because, there's so many immigrants, or it's because, women aren't raising their kids, and so now all these kids are bad and they're criminals, or, whatever other thing, whatever thing it is, whatever thing there is that people are seeing as the cause of their problems, right? As opposed to the realities, right? Right. Um, Veganista says there are great debates about that agnostics versus atheists. Is racism a philosophical tool? I don't know. I don't know. I mean, I'm getting to the point where I'm thinking about everything. I'm just in this framing place right now where I look at things as simply as these are ways that information is being used to serve a particular function in the society. And so I'm calling all of these things technologies, right? Language is a technology, right? It's not just the computer and YouNow and these headphones, right? And the fancy stuff. Technology is, anything that might be used to serve a function, make, I don't even want to say make our lives more efficient, because sometimes technology doesn't actually make our life more efficient. We just believe it does. And that's another reason that I'm trying to kind of get into this idea of economics, because economics forces us to look at like everything, right? Understands that we have this limited amount of time, energy, brain matter, right? Resources, money, all of these things that we can devote to how we're going to experience our lives, right? How we're going to live our lives. And in choosing between these things, if I have used my time and energy to internalize mythology, that means that that's time and energy that I haven't been using to internalize like certain types of reality, right? Because there's only so much that we have, right? And so Paulo Freire actually talks about this idea of stimulating credulity, right? Stimulating one's belief centers, right, as a skill, right? And so once that center has been stimulated, it puts one in the position to continue believing in the mythology that the oppressor has offered us, right? And it's interesting because for those if any of you have read Althusser, Louis Althusser, the French philosopher, in their ideology and the ideological apparatuses, they discuss the various apparatuses that are used to indoctrinate citizens into the dominant worldview, right? The dominant worldview. And Althusser talks about religion having been the dominant of those apparatuses, right? I think there are maybe 10 of them that are listed, right? So I think that includes things like family, the media, sports, unions, the legal system. All these things are apparatuses that are used to indoctrinate us to believe in this the dominant worldview. But Althusser says that religion was the dominant, but that has shifted, and so that education becomes the dominant, right? So where religion once was used to stimulate credulity, to stimulate our belief in things that cannot be proved. This a kind of passivity, right, where we're not being asked to think critically, we're asked to simply believe. And in the modern education system, or the education system that Freire is talking about, that has been replaced, according to Althusser and according to Paulo Freire. It is the education system where this indoctrination takes place. Marion P., thank you so much for the likes. Right. Some other ideas that come up. This banking method, Freire suggests it inhibits creative power. So our creativity is actually being stifled and inhibited in this. And then he also talks about some things that were interesting. He talks about the language that the oppressor gives us to talk about ourselves. So we begin to talk about ourselves as, the disenfranchised, the disadvantaged, welfare recipients, perhaps, and marginalized. And Freire laughs at the absurdity of this. How are you going to call the oppressed, the exploited individuals in a society? How are you going to call them marginalized when they are serving as the engine that the society is running on? They're at the very center. They're at the very center, right? This is where we're extracting wealth. This is where we're exploiting labor, right? McDonald's would not be McDonald's if they didn't have, if they weren't paying people that minimum wage, right? If they didn't have a labor force willing to work for that minimum wage. And this happens around the globe. We need a laboring class that is cheap, cheap, cheap. And the way that we ensure that labor class is through, the oppressive tactics, violence that's used, right? So but these people, the world is running on the energy of this class of people. So how can we call them marginalized as if they're over there somehow, not a part of it all? And Freire, finds this absurd and talks about that in chapter 2, right? And so then so Swag Vegan was so wonderful to talk to us about this idea of the problem posing education. This is the liberatory education, right? But before we can engage in the liberatory education, that's teacher-student contradiction that has to be overcome. So we can't, I can't walk into this as the person who, I understand that I'm doing things. I'm being nice. And I want to make sure that everybody feels like they're an equal. I want to create the sense that this is a democratic workspace, but I still believe your head is empty and I'm gonna fill it with the information that I want to fill it with, right? So we have to overcome that. We have to overcome that contradiction. And that's another thing that's discussed in chapter 2, right? So Paulo Freire is going to offer us some ways in which this can be done, right? Because it's a process. It's not just it's not a shift in attitude. There's something that needs to be done because, again, the only model that we have as the teacher, as someone who is also immersed in that oppressive system, right? Is also immersed in that oppressive system. How is that person going to simply, change their worldview, right? So, by overcoming this contradiction as the teacher, student, teacher, the teacher has to learn how to be a human being as well as the students are learning how to be a human being. And this is a co-learning space that the teacher is helping to encourage and inspire. And this is through a particular process that Paulo Freire is going to outline for us in chapter 3. It's going to outline this for us in chapter 3. And so I'm going to go ahead and jump on to talk about chapter 3. So in chapter 3, Freire walks us through a process for developing the content in a liberatory education program. So we're going to discover, I hope, in chapter 3, well, how do you do something else? How do you do this in a different way? And Paulo Freire lays it out in a kind of step-by-step process, or at least a way, right? And as a practitioner of the theater of the oppressed is a framework that makes concrete the theory that Paulo Freire is outlining for us in chapter 3. And so what I'm going to ask you to do, as opposed to just answering some questions about chapter 3, did you read it, did you get it right, is to offer your own process. How would you transition from a banking method of education to a more liberatory education? And my hope is that we're going to just get some people to come on and talk about it, just to talk about like how you would make that transition. So again, that's for next week. And those of you at home, if you want to start answering in the comments below, please feel free. I am going to, what have I talked about today? I've talked about Althusser, so I'll include a link to Ideology and the Ideological Apparatuses, at least an English version of that. I'll also post some of my notes that I took to prepare for today. Again, I want to thank Swag Vegan for jumping on. I want to thank all of you for joining us today. Yeah, that's it. That's it. I hope you have fun. I get so excited about it. I'm sure you guys know, I can tell. I love this so much. But that's it for this video. Like it. If you like it, share, comment, subscribe. This is Reg signing off. Love yourselves. Peace.